Good morning. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you had a great weekend. Little Johnny wasn't making good grades. One day he came up to the teacher's desk and just stood there as if he wanted to say something. "Yes, Johnny," the teacher said. "Is there something you want to say?" He replied, "I don't want to scare you, but my daddy says if I don't get better grades, somebody is going to get a spanking. So you'd better step up your game." Apparently, Johnny was holding out hope that the teacher would have to bear the brunt of the responsibility for his bad grades. I think Christians need to step up their game when it comes to teaching. We're all teachers. You realize that, don't you? Every Christian is a teacher, or at least they should be. How many of you are on Facebook? Obviously, all of you that are watching, right? Those of you who are, kind of regulars on Facebook and use it as a platform for sharing your life, you know that it can be a great tool. But whether it be politics or sports or current events or family photos or kids' accomplishments, Facebook is where people share what's most important to them. Maybe you're not on Facebook real regularly, but perhaps you have a cell phone. You ever pulled out that cell phone and started showing someone pictures of your grandkids, pictures of that deer that you shot, or pictures from your vacation to Florida? You know what you're doing when you share on Facebook or share pictures from your phone? You're teaching. Sharing what you care about is called teaching. And in Matthew chapter 10, verse 37, Jesus says these words: "He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me." If there's ever a passage that needed to be taken into context, this is certainly one of them. Let's do a little substituting here. Anyone who loves the Dallas Cowboys more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their political party more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves fishing more than me is not worthy of me. What if Jesus were the most important topic we talked about? What if he were the primary topic in our everyday conversations? Back in the first century, they didn't have Sunday school. They didn't have overhead projectors or flannel graphs or PowerPoint or whiteboards or puppets. They didn't have classrooms inside a church building. They didn't even have church buildings. But you know what they did have? They had a driving passion for Jesus. And they talked about him everywhere. Now, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but here goes. You've heard me say this many times over, and I get frustrated when Christians talk about being the first church. We just need to get back to being the first century church. We need to be like they were in the book of Acts. And all too often, we kind of stick our chest out, pat ourselves on the back, and maybe even criticize all the denominations for not having the same goal. But here's my frustration. Our efforts to be like the first century church always seems to focus on singing and preaching and taking the Lord's Supper and prayer and giving. The 5 acts of worship. And that's it. That's where we settle. That's about as far as we go. If I were to die tomorrow, hopefully the one thing you would remember me say in the time that I've been with you is that the church is a movement, not a monument. And we need to stop saying that we're the first century church or the true church unless and until we're prepared to start acting like it. The first church had a passion for Jesus and the gospel that drove them to share it with anyone and everyone, anywhere and anytime. The first church gathered, but they also scattered because they understood something that too many Christians don't comprehend today, and it's this. It's not just about what we do on Sundays. Our first century brethren were seeking to change the world, not live in their own little world. They were a movement. And you know what movements do? They move. Among other things, a movement requires teachers, people who are willing to share the message. And do you know where all of this starts? In Scripture, it started with one man, Jesus. And from Jesus, it was passed on to the apostles. Paul took the torch and continued to pass it down to people like Timothy. And on down the line, the torch was passed. And here it is. Here's your torch. We are the recipients. We are the ones who have been charged with keeping that flame burning and passing along the torch. And while this is a team effort, it cannot be argued that there is an I in team, because you are crucial to the success of this mission. And you say, well, me? What can I do? I'm just one individual. Well, consider Hezekiah. When it looked as though Sennacherib could not be stopped, Hezekiah went to God in prayer. He prayed for the deliverance of his people. 2 Kings chapter 19, verses 14 through 19 is a record of this prayer. As a result of Hezekiah's supplication to God, an angel of the Lord went out at night and struck 185,000 Assyrians dead. Sennacherib got the message and returned home. One man plus one prayer equaled great power. You think about Elijah. In 1 Kings chapter 17, Elijah prayed that it would not rain for 3 years, as instructed by God. And after 3 years, he prayed that it would rain, and it did. One man's prayer had a major impact. James tells us that the effective prayer of a righteous man can accomplish much. He then goes on to remind us of the impact of Elijah. He says, a man with a nature like ours. And he prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it did not rain on the earth for 3 years and 6 months. Then he prayed again, and the sky poured rain, and the earth produced its fruit. What difference can one person make? What difference can one little prayer from one little old me make? Folks, it can make a huge difference. It can make a profound difference because prayer is powerful. God believes in us. He believes in prayer. We need to believe in those things as well. Now understand something here. I'm not talking about changing the world. I mean, oftentimes when it comes to evangelism, we speak in grandiose terms. We come up with these grand ideas about how we're going to take over a city or take over a continent. We pump thousands, perhaps millions of dollars into programs to accomplish this goal. And so we organize a campaign, we keep a tally, and we brag about the number of baptisms we have. If it's not a substantial number, then we feel like our efforts have failed. My friends, campaigns can produce much fruit. Spending money on evangelistic efforts can be necessary and profitable. Taking the world by storm with the gospel is certainly a worthy goal. However, I'm not talking about saving the world this morning. I'm talking about each and every one of us winning just one. Each one reach one. Can we just do that? But here's the deal. You've got to want this. You've got to want to grow. Several years ago, I went back to my hometown for my 10-year high school reunion. I haven't been to another one since, but if you've ever been to a high school reunion, you know that there's always that one classmate who refuses to grow up. He's still stuck in high school. He hasn't changed a bit, although he needs to. Some Christians are like that. They refuse to grow. Some Christians don't want to grow up. 1 Peter 2:2-3 reads, and let me put it on the screen. Like newborn babies, long for the pure milk of the word, so that by it you may grow in respect to salvation, if you have tasted the kindness of the Lord. Babies don't stay babies. They're expected to grow. Being a baby is not the goal. At some point, you've got to take off the bib and move from being a passive recipient to an active servant. The church should function to assist members in this effort, but it cannot be the only source of food. The church should function to train people to take ownership of their spiritual growth. Like parents, we must help babes in Christ develop into mature adults, but you will never reach full maturity while being dependent upon the church for all of your spiritual feeding. We must all become self-feeders. The church can and should assist and encourage one another to grow and develop as Christians, but ultimately, we're going to have to become self-sufficient if we ever want to reach maturity. Church is there to assist us in our growth and therefore to provide additional nourishment. But sadly, the church offers a spiritual feast that many members choose not to attend. Too often, we miss regular meals that provide much-needed sustenance. We all need help growing. We all need assistance in developing and maturing. The Lord's church should function to provide that assistance, but we must make the most of the opportunities that the church provides for nourishment. Like Peter wrote, we must be people who long, who crave the pure milk of the Word. We want it so badly because we want the nourishment that it brings and we want the growth that comes with it. You know, I will often hear Christians say, we just need to get back to the basics. And over the years, I've had individuals even say to me, you need to preach on first principles more. And while I don't disagree, I am also well aware of the fact that some folks find comfort in studying these first principles and simply banging the drum. Sometimes the hidden message in you need to just go back to the basics is you just need to affirm what I believe. They know these basics. They know them so well that they just become their default. And instead of moving forward, they just continue to bang that drum. Preachers do this. Churches do this. They feel a need to continually rehearse the basics and they wonder why their church isn't growing. The Hebrew writer would say, move on. Once you've laid that foundation, it's time to build something strong and sturdy. Because so often the ones that are wanting us to get back to the basics are the ones that know the basics. What difference can one person make? I mean, really, what can one person do? In a city of 120,000 like Abilene, what can one person do? Well, need I remind you that Jonah changed a city of 120,000 by himself. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should expect that type of result. What I am suggesting is this: God is powerful. You by yourself can accomplish very little, but armed with faith and the gospel, you can become a weapon of mass instruction. You become a valuable tool in the mission to spread the message. You know, a basketball in my hands is worth very little, about $15 to $20 to be exact. However, a basketball in LeBron James's hands, well, it's worth millions upon millions. A baseball bat in my hands is worth anywhere from $50 to $300 on the high end. But a baseball bat in the hands of, say, Nolan Arenado or Yadier Molina, my favorite Cardinals, by the way, in their hands it's worth $100 million or more. A rod in my hands is worth practically nothing, but in the hand of Moses, it could part the sea. A slingshot in my hands is a kid's toy, but a slingshot in the hands of David was a mighty weapon. It depends on whose hands it's in. Nails in my hands might produce a birdhouse, but nails in the hands of Jesus produce salvation. The gospel has been placed in your hands. Will you make a difference with it? I'm sorry if this came off a little emotionally charged or like I was being condescending or talking down. I certainly didn't want to come across that way. This is something I'm passionate about, and I hope that you will be as well. One person can change the world. And we change the world one soul at a time, don't we? We don't change it through politics or anything like that. We change it through changing souls. And so I just want us to understand that there is great power in one life, one person. Each one, reach one. We don't have to go out and spend millions of dollars to, take over a continent. We can start right here in our own backyard, just reaching one. Let's start there. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you have a great day. I love you. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.